Take your seats. Good morning and welcome to the City Governance Committee for the 17th of January 2021. I would like to begin today's meeting by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we are gathered and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. And welcome to the City Governance Committee. I declare this meeting open at 9:39 a.m. I would like to advise meeting attendees that this meeting is being webcast and is being audio recorded. Do any councillors have a leave of absence to declare? And I believe we are all sitting here as a full cohort today. For those following the agenda items today, I have changed the order of the items meeting around a bit because we have so many that will go into confidential. So today we're going to be moving through items 4, 6, then 7, then we'll come back to 5 and we will do 5.8 followed by 5.7 before we go into 5.1 through to 5.6, which all have parts of confidential. So apologies for the backwards and forwards today. I will now proceed to item 4.1 and I invite Acting Director of Organisational Services, Ms Kay Sullivan, to please enter the discussions. But before we open the discussion on this item, do any councillors have a conflict of interest to declare? There being none, I will now refer to Acting Director of Organisational Services, Ms Kay Sullivan, to open public discussion. You may proceed.
Thank you very much, Chair. Dane Poltman will be presenting this report.
Thank you.
Just a double correction there. My name's Robert Strachan, Acting CEO. I'll be talking to the report today, but ably assisted by Dane, who's the Senior Project Planning Advisor. So he'll be answering all the hard questions. Today I'd just like to say good morning. Just talking to the 2020-2021 Operational Plan Quarter 2 report this morning. And just to highlight, I'll take the report as read, but I'd just like to highlight a couple of things. Obviously there are 76 projects in the 2020-2021 Operational Plan. At the end of Quarter 2, the health and performance of the plan was at 92%, which simply means that of the 76 projects, 58 were on track and 12 projects were completed. So 70 of the 76 projects are looking good. This is a little bit better than last financial year and where we were at in relation to Quarter 2, where we had a 85% performance result that year. There are 5 projects that are indicated as monitor. And there is one project which is not proceeding, and that project was the subject to a prior council decision in relation to an advocacy campaign for the state election last year, which didn't proceed. But on the report this quarter, there are 5 projects that we are monitoring fairly closely. They are outlined in the report, but in brief, there's QL 1.1.3. Which relates to the Kingston Butter Factory, which has been delayed due to various reasons, such as contamination on site, the need to undertake additional capital works and rain at the end of last calendar year. But it is expected to be completed by June 2021. There was a feasibility study in relation to the Riverine Discovery Centre, which is GR 2.2.1. And it's a fairly complicated design. There's been a fair bit of consultation with the traditional owners, and due to the complexity of design with regard to flooding, that will be delayed, and it's anticipated that will be delivered in March 2021. The third project we're monitoring relates to an educational and compliance program that the Development Assessment Branch is putting together. That has been delayed. The resources in that particular branch have been refocused on activity in the Magistrates Court last year. So they're playing a little bit of a catch-up. However, the activity in the Magistrates Court will assist to inform a better proactive educational program on compliance. So that's been moved to April 2021. There's a CC 2.1, which is completion of a condition survey on the Seal Road network. That delay relates to a laser on the equipment that's used to undertake that survey being broken, but that surveying has commenced this month. The final one there is NG 4.1.2, which relates to the people plan. There are 5 focus areas in the people plan with 16 projects listed. Kim Bryant, the new People and Culture Manager, is doing a full review of the people plan and progress against the people plan because it does conclude this year. And that will be the subject of a report back to Council with regard to progress. The 5 focus areas you may remember in that plan are around safety and wellbeing, Council being a great place to work, leadership and accountability, workplace of the future, and change management and leadership. The delays relate to COVID-19, where a high number of resources in the people and culture team have been taken offline for some time to assist our people leaders, our managers, and staff during the period of COVID. And it's an area of intense work at the moment in relation to what the workforce looks like coming out of COVID-19. So that will be the subject of a report back. And that is one that we're doing a lot of work on to determine if it can all be delivered this year, or we may be coming back to request some of it be delivered possibly a little bit differently given the different landscape in the next iteration of our people plan. Happy to take questions.
Do any councillors have any questions? I have a couple. When I met with Ms Sullivan the other day, we were talking about, on page 8, councillors, of your Gov agenda, wanted to find out what the 14 strategic people projects were. Do we have that list yet?
Through the chair, I do have that list. I'm happy to circulate it to all councillors.
Wonderful. And the other one I wanted to ask, which we spoke about the other day, was on page 19 of your Gov agenda, community safety programming, the 48 targeted crime prevention and community safety activities, just so that the other councillors can get a heads up about when this will actually be coming into their division and that sort of thing.
Through the chair, I have that information from Nick Maguire as well, so I'm happy to circulate the types of projects and also how our councillors can be involved in developing those projects as well.
Fantastic. Is there any other questions from any other councillors? There being no more questions, is there a mover for the report's motion as displayed on the screen? Thank you. Councillor Hall has moved and Councillor Raven has seconded. Do any other councillors wish to speak to the motion? No. I will now open the floor to vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That has been carried unanimously. That marks the end of the Acting Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Robert Strachan. Is there any general business for him? Mr. Strachan, did you have any general business for us this morning? No? Perfect. There being none, I will now move on to the next item. Thank you to you both. We will now go to item 6.1. Can the Acting Administration Manager, Miss Anita White, please enter the discussions? And before we open this discussion item, do any councillors have a conflict of interest to declare? No. There being none, we will just wait for Miss White to pop up here so that she may open the floor for discussion. Well, so that she can talk to the report. Apologies.
Through the chair, thank you. Good morning, councillors. Nice to see you all, though it's the middle of February. Nice to see you all in 2021. Today I'm presenting a report regarding telecommunications facilities on council land. I will take the report as read, however it is a detailed report and I would like to highlight the following. The report provides an overview of the telecommunications leasing portfolio. It outlines how income received from the tenure arrangements have previously been managed. It sets out options for how that income might be managed in the future, making various recommendations for councillors' consideration, and it seeks endorsement of a new policy and procedure to give effect to those arrangements, including a revised fee structure. Council receives approximately $960,000 per annum in income from telecommunications facilities on council-owned and controlled land and infrastructure. What is being recommended is that 5% of that income be retained by administration branch to conduct annual inspections to ensure lease compliance and community safety standards, and to conduct minor maintenance where required. That the water business retain the income for maintenance of their critical infrastructure on which the telco facilities are located, primarily water reservoirs, and that the balance be placed into reserve with council to make decisions as to how those funds are expended as part of the annual budget process. There is also money held in reserve from income received to date. After taking account of money already committed for projects by branches, there is a balance of approximately $2.8 million. Councillors, that has been updated since the report was drafted. What the report proposes is that from those reserves, $32,500 be made available to conduct site audits of the 5 non-operational water towers to identify what telco facilities are located on those sites, address any safety concerns and make recommendations as to future management. That $100,000 be reserved to deliver safety and security requirements for those sites as required, and that $170,000 be made available to have a full-time staffing resource to manage the telecommunications portfolio for an initial period of 18 months to demonstrate the value for money of that role. This would allow time to embed the new policies, develop strong relationships with the telco carriers, and oversee the rollout of new 5G technology. In terms of recommendations, after consulting further with Finance Branch regarding future budget rounds, recommendation 7 has been adjusted on the screen from the time of the report to provide that the Finance Manager be requested to ensure that any balance of the reserve referred to above is made available during annual budget deliberations, so that it's not a one-off for this upcoming budget cycle. The recommendations of the report set out a different approach to the allocation of funding than has previously been adopted. However, we believe that the recommendations provide a flexible mechanism for Council to determine priorities on a year-to-year basis. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I will now open the floor to councillors for discussion. Councillor Bradley.
So much through the Chair, Councillor Wilcox. Historically, this money went to divisional councillors, is that correct, to allocate?
Through the Chair, the money was taken by the branches, and the previous arrangement was that the money could be expended by the branches in consultation with divisional councillors.
Thank you. Thank you for clarification. You said 5 towers. Where exactly are the 5 towers? Sorry, it was a while since I read the report. Where are the 5 towers, please?
Through the Chair, I know that there is Sapien Street, Dean Street. I'd have to come back to confirm the other 3.
So Dean Street in Rochdale South you're talking about?
That would be correct.
Right.
Are there any other questions from any other councillors? Oh, Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, through the Chair. There is also money allocated to the SES to go to their organisation for the continuing of their organisation to actively work in Logan.
Through the Chair, Councillor Murphy, a good question. One of the sites that we have is at Daisy Hill, and it is Crown Reserve or state land that is for the purpose of local government purposes for the SES. What we would anticipate is that that money received from the telco facility on that site would each year, as it has been historically, be allocated towards the SES.
Thank you. And just to reiterate to the councillors, the remaining funds will come up to our annual budget, and then it'll be discussed, those funds, where they would be dispersed as a whole of city approach.
Thank you, Councillor. What's being proposed is that we could do a supplementary report to COW that would identify for councillors the total reserve available for expenditure. That would make a distinction between the money that is available from income received on freehold land, for which there would be no caveats on how it is expended, but also the money that is received from Crown or state land, for which that money under the Land Act would have to be redirected back to projects on Crown or state land.
Thank you for your time.
Do any other councillors have any further questions? Oh, sorry, Councillor Karansky, sorry.
Thank you. Through the chair. Anita, we're talking about telecommunications facilities today. Does this body of work look at NBN towers at all?
Thank you. Through the chair, Councillor Karansky. NBN towers are generally a high impact, so that for instance, we have one in your directorate at Mundoolan. So they are generally a high impact tower and are included in this portfolio.
So the funding that's coming into council in terms of rental of those sites, how is that being managed for NBN towers?
Councillor, exactly the same as a mobile tower. It covers it. It is all dealt with under this policy.
When Councillor Bradley asked a moment ago of the towers that are in question, the one in Mundoolan was one of those.
Councillor, that is not a non-operational water site. That's an operational water site. So the towers that we would do site audits on, the 5, are actually non-operational water reservoirs on which telecommunications facilities have been located.
Thanks, Anita. I'm sorry if I'm being obtuse. My question really relates to that I'm conscious that NBN have different agreements than, say, Telstra for, and some towers co-locate infrastructure and some are independent. So my question really is, does this report pick up all towers, albeit NBN or telecommunication towers across the city?
Through the chair, yes, it does.
Thank you.
Councillor Russell and then Councillor Bradley. Sure. Councillor Bradley.
Thank you, through the chair. Can I just ask, is one of them the tower in Tower Street? I think it is. Springwood?
Through the chair, I'd have to come back on what the 5 sites are.
I'm just finding it a bit hard to vote on something that I don't know where. And I'm just conscious that there are issues surrounding both of those sites that I have referred to in terms of the latter one. There has been issues with sound for residents and, you know, who pays for putting up sound barriers, etc. So I can't consciously vote on this today without knowing all that information about where it is exactly.
Councillor Russell.
Thank you, through the chair. I tend to agree that a serious omission in this report is the location of the sites that we're discussing, and I would find it difficult to vote on this without that information. But my question is, does this report essentially say that that funds that were previously that have been collecting and that would otherwise be allocated to branches in consultation with divisional councillors or with the divisional councillors where the sites are, that would no longer, like that funding would no longer be allocated in that way?
Through the chair, that is correct. You will recall, councillors, that we had a briefing last year which identified for you each of the 39 sites. There are some divisions that have no telco facilities, that would be divisions 4 and 5, and there are other divisions which have the proportion of the facilities.
Thank you. And could I please just inquire, I can't find anything in the report that spells this out, but does this policy or do the policies in relation to telecommunications facilities, does that also apply to billboards?
Through the chair, it does not. Billboards are dealt with separately, largely because they are often on road reserves. If they're on road reserves, they're managed through the roads branch. We will manage the tenure, but they are on totally different arrangements to what we would see with our telecommunications carriers.
If they weren't, if they were managed by a different branch other than the roads branch, would that differ? Or like if it was managed by Parks branch, would that be covered in these policies?
Through the chair, no, that's not the intention.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. Councillor Murphy, and then I have a question, and then back to Councillor Kransky.
Thank you, through the chair. With regards to the maintenance of these telecommunication poles, the 5% admin fee that you have set aside, would that help with that maintenance cost in any of those locations? And then obviously we also have the full-time staff person that we are hoping to allocate that would oversee all of these.
Through the chair, that's the intention. What we'd like to do is have annual inspections of the sites to make sure that the telco carriers are complying with their obligations under the lease. So that is to ensure that the fencing is maintained to prevent community access to these sites. It's to ensure that there's not build-up of rubbish or vermin within the compounds. It's that sort of community safety focus. So that's an allocation of that. It's then managing the relationship in the event that the compliance is not happening, so managing that in a proactive way. And the officer that would be appointed would be managing the tenures. So we often get requests for an upgrade of facilities or access, and so it's managing that day to day, but also ensuring that our leases are current and meeting the requirements.
So would that answer Councillor Bradley's maintenance question? No?
No, there's no money for it.
Okay.
Sure.
Can I just respond to that query? Thank you, through the chair. There was no money allocated for this sound barrier at all, because it didn't fit in the criteria of arrangement or agreement between council and the telco. So residents surrounding are having to put up with noise from air conditioners and which go 24/7 around these sites, and they abut residential.
So through the chair, would that become part of the 5% administration cost?
Through the chair, our experience is that often this can be negotiated with the carrier, so that if there is an issue, this officer that we're looking to fund who has the relationship with the carrier, we'd go out, we'd engage the Hugh branch people that have the sort of sound monitoring abilities. We would go out and then make recommendations. If there was sufficient money available to be able to address that, then we would do that. But ultimately, if the carrier is causing the problem, we'd be putting pressure on them to fix the problem.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. So just before I move on to Councillor Kransky, I don't see, for me personally, I don't see it the role that council is to put up these sound barriers. It should be pushed back onto the carriers themselves because it is their facility as such. Is that correct?
Thank you. That would be our intention.
And just to clarify, so I think it was 32.5 for a site order, 100 for 100,000 for a safety, and 170 for full-time staff. So that portion of funds is across the 39 sites. It's not just solely for the 5 sites that you were talking about, is it?
That's correct. It would be to manage the entire portfolio.
Thank you. That's my question answered. Councillor Kransky.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy to move the report, but I was just going to request between now and ordinary council whether officers might be able to provide Councillor Russell and the balance of the councillors with what those sites are, so that they have that information ahead of ordinary council.
Through the chair, could I clarify whether you require all of the sites or simply the 5 sites that are the non-operational water towers that we need to conduct audits on?
I think councillors would like to see all of the sites if possible, please, through the chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Before I go to Councillor Lane, I've got Councillor Raven. Is that okay, or do you?
Exactly on that answer.
Okay, Councillor Lane.
It's in page 8 of the report that you gave to us in August last year.
Councillor Raven.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to Ms White. If the sound barrier, it sounds like from Councillor Bradley's comments that sound barriers have been an issue for a long time. Is that fair to say, Councillor Bradley? Or is it a recent? Okay, never mind. I withdraw my remarks.
Thank you. I'll just wait on Councillor Lane to bring this report up. I do remember seeing this as well. I was wondering where it was.
Through the chair, as we've discussed, I will circulate that list as shortly as I can after today's meeting.
Thank you. Do any further councillors have any further discussions on the agenda or on the item? No? There being none, I have a mover for the report's motion being Councillor Karansky as displayed on the screen, and I have a seconder in Councillor Murphy. All those in favours, please raise your hand. Please keep them raised. So that is Mayor Power, Councillor Raven, Councillor Hall, Councillor Fraser, Councillor Jeremiah, you don't have your hand up, do you? Sorry, I need to take my glasses off. Councillor Bannon, Councillor Stamp, Councillor Karansky, Councillor Murphy and Councillor Wilcox. That has been carried. And Councillor Bradley?
Have my name abstained at the moment because I haven't got the information in front of me.
Councillor Lane?
I'm abstaining. I don't have confidence that people know what they're quite across with the ones that are abstaining.
Councillor Russell?
Also abstaining, thanks.
Councillor Jeremiah?
Abstaining.
Thank you. That marks the end of the Acting Administrator's Manager's reports. Is there any other general business for Ms White? No? Ms White, do you have any general business for us?
Through the chair, no thank you.
Thank you. I will now move on to the next item. Thank you, Ms White. I will now refer to item 7.1. Can the Health, Environment and Waste Manager, Mr Michael Asnikar, please enter the discussions? And before we open discussions on this item, do any councillors have a conflict of interest to declare? All right, there being no conflicts of interest to declare, I note that 7.1 does have confidential in it, and I note that it is considered necessary to take the discussion of this report into a closed session, as the confidential attachment contains information regarding the local government's budget. I remind councillors that if there's no desire to discuss the confidential matters, there is no requirement to move into closed session. So I'm in your hands. Would anyone like to move into confidential to discuss the report? There being none, I will hand over to Mr Michael Asnikar.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Morning, councillors. As part of our waste collection related policies and procedures leading up to the start of our new waste collection contract in July, we're proposing a new policy and procedure that updates the methodology by which the Waste Business Unit annual dividend payment to council is calculated. The proposed methodology aims to ensure that the Waste Business Unit's future dividend payments to council remain at a similar level to what has historically been paid. The proposed new methodology is based directly on the Waste Business Unit's operational financial performance, and it reflects a modern methodology which is being used by other Queensland local governments, and it reduces the fluctuation risks of the current methodology, which is linked to the waste collection contract value as opposed to the operational performance of the branch overall.
Thank you. I will now open it up to councillors for discussion. Does anyone have any questions for Mr Asnikar? This may be very quick. Do I have a mover for the motion that is on the board? Thank you. Councillor Raven has moved. Councillor Bradley has seconded the motion. I'll now open the floor to vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That has been carried unanimously. Thank you. That's how you operate. That's a good report. Thank you, Mr. Asnikar. That marks the end of Mr. Asnikar's report. Did anyone have any GB before he runs out of the door? No? Thank you. Okay. 5.8. Sorry, we're skipping around the agenda items. Apologies. For the gallery and the public watching online, we're now going to discuss items 5.8 followed by 5.7. Then we will come back to 5.1 through to 5.6, which all need to go into confidential to be discussed. So I'll now refer to item 5.8 and can the Finance Manager, Ms Caroline Bugg, please enter discussions. Before we open for discussion on this item, do any councillors have a conflict of interest to declare? There being none, I will now refer to Finance Manager Ms Bugg to open public discussion. You may proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, councillors. Item 5.8 is the Executive Financial Report to the end of November 2020. Just a couple of points to note on that. The operating surplus at the end of November was $6.7 million, which is up 2% against the year-to-date budget. The favourable variance is predominantly driven by revenue, which the two main areas for that are DA fees, which are above budget, and also the water usage due to the first half of the financial year being quite dry. Operating expenditure is only slightly greater than the year-to-date budget of 1% over budget. So they're the key points of that report, but I am happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. I will now open the floor to councillors for discussion. Does anyone have any questions for Ms Bugg? There being no questions, is there a mover for the report's motion as displayed on the screen? Councillor Murphy has moved the motion. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Stemp has seconded. Do any other councillors wish to speak to the motion? No. I will now open the floor to vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Mayor Power. Mayor Power. Are you voting? Thank you. That has been carried unanimously. Thank you. I will now refer to item 5.7. And before we open discussion on this item, do any councillors have a conflict of interest to declare? There being none, I will now refer to Ms Bugg again to open public discussion. You may proceed.
Thank you, Chair. This report is the Executive Financial Report to the end of December. Again, just a couple of highlights that I can provide for you. The operating surplus year to date is up to $9.5 million. You will have heard me just mention that in November that was 6.7. Again, DA fees continue to be quite strong. This is predominantly externally driven, and we do believe that the current federal grant is driving a lot of that activity. The water usage again remains quite high. We will see that come off slightly in January, February due to the wetter weather. And another point of interest in the revenue is the number of grants that we received that weren't considered in the budget totaled over $850,000. Operating expenditure is only a slight variance to budget, with less than 1% greater than the year-to-date budget. So we're overspending operating expenditure by $305,000 on a $319,000 budget. In regard to rates, the rateable property growth for the quarter ending 31 December was 394 properties. The outstanding rates at the end of December stand at 8.82% of the total rates book, if you like. And I'd just like to note there that after the COVID relief package, we have re-established our debt recovery processes as at, well, the 1st of October. In the report, you'll also notice that the hardship numbers have started to level out against last year's numbers So that's a good sign, I believe, for the community. In regard to the debtors, there are two predominant debtors, Brisbane Royal Point Corp, that remain outstanding. The Point Corp debt, there are discussions continuing with the Director of Strategy and Sustainability around the environmental offsets for that property. So we're not quite sure where that one will land, but we're keeping a very close eye on it. Other than that, I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. I will now open the floor for councillors for discussion, and I have Councillor Lane that would like to ask some questions.
Thanks very much, through you, Chair. Can I just ask a question around, obviously, the debt with the Brisbane Roar, which was, it's a Premier, is it Premier Soccer League or is it a Queensland Soccer League? I don't know, I don't play the game. Premier Soccer League. So they owe Logan residents $288,766, is that right? And they're continuing to play. There's the second one that I had. It's a curious question. Prepayment of cemetery plot and interment fees. So people book the future. How do they have late payments for that? I'm just curious. And what happens if they go before they pay?
Unanticipated early requirement of lot.
Through the chair, you can pre-order.
You can pre-book. Wow. Good to know. Thank you.
I do know my mum has already pre-ordered her block in Mount Gravatt. So, yeah, not a great topic. But anyway, are there any other questions for Ms Bugg? Councillor Raven.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Fantastic outcome with the increased operating surplus, and want to give a big shout out to DA for the amazing work they're doing at processing everything with all that, with the development and investment boom we're seeing at the moment. Ms Bugg, are you expecting on seeing that to continue to grow, or are there some there's some big expenditure, like operating costs, that we're going to have to deal with over the next 6 months, or are we looking around these sorts of numbers or slightly higher by the time we get to the end of the financial year?
Through the chair, I'm inherently conservative in that regard. I would happily say that we should be able to maintain that level of surplus. Okay. However, it is all to do with the timing. So over the coming 6 months, we're halfway there, but I'm not going to make any promises.
I'm not asking you to give me an ironclad guarantee, just wanting to know if there's anything on the horizon, some big cost cliffs that are coming that could see us go from 9.5 million down to a significantly lower number that might give people cause for concern.
Yeah, no, we're not aware of any risks in that area.
Fantastic. And then just some clarity around the Point Court debt, and I use inverted commas because we provided them, the reason why this is a debt is because we provided them a refund that was too large.
Correct.
And they're contesting that it was just right. Is that right?
Through the chair, we did give them a refund that was too large. Since then, there's been state government and federal government environmental offsets being put over the land, and we're now trying to work out which parts are local government offsets versus state and federal. So once that has been worked through, we'll know exactly how much they owe us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions from councillors? There being none, is there a mover for the report's motion as displayed on the screen? Councillor Lane has moved the motion, and I have Councillor Raven as a seconder. Do any other councillors wish to speak to the motion? No? I will now open the floor to vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That has been carried unanimously. Thank you. All right, now we're going to move into 5.1 to 5.6, and we will be going in and out of confidentials, so apologies to those watching at home and to the gallery. I will now refer to items 5.1 to 5.6, which collectively discuss the reports for rate exemptions and concessions, and they are numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. Before we open discussion on these items, do any councillors have a conflict of interest to declare? And I remind councillors that I'm calling for conflicts collectively on items 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, 5.4, 5.5 and 5.6 of the agenda. Councillor Karansky.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I, Laurie Karansky, declare a declarable conflict of interest in relation to item 5.1/8.1 of the City Governance Committee on the 17th of February 2021. The nature of the declarable conflict of interest is as follows. In the background papers of this report, the contact for the exemption claim is the administrator of the No Leftovers Facebook page, an active campaign against me and some of my councillor colleagues from the previous council term. I've determined that this declarable conflict of interest is not of sufficient significance that a reasonable person could have a perception of bias, or that it would lead me to making a decision on the matter that is contrary to the public interest. I will best perform my responsibility of serving the overall public interest of the whole of the council's area by participating in the discussion and voting on this matter. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Just bear with me for 1 minute. We just need to double check something before we move on. We're just double checking if we have to work through all three at once or just one at a time.
If they all relate to the same item, Madam Chair, then, and I know Councillor Bradley's does, and I would probably like to speak to it as well. I'm not sure what the Mayor's position would be. Then all councillors who have a potential conflict with that item need to raise it so that we can be excluded from the debate and the vote.
Okay, so Councillor Bradley, is yours relating to 5.1 as well? Yes. And Mayor Power, yours is 5.1 as well? Okay. Yes.
Through the chair, tricky one because it goes into confidential. Like if it wasn't in confidential, you could clearly show it's a healthy debate. If it's in confidential, it puts a grey area.
The items are in confidential, so we do need to do the conflict of interest before we move in to confidential, unfortunately. All right, we will go to Councillor Bradley first. Next, if you would like to declare.
Thank you. Through the Chair, Councillor Wilcox. I, Councillor Lisa Bradley, wish to declare a declarable conflict of interest in relation to item 5.1/8.1 of the City Governments Committee on the 17th of February 2021. The nature of the declarable conflict of interest is as follows. In the background papers of this report, the contact for the exemption claim is the administrator of No Leftovers Facebook group, which ran a political campaign against myself and some of my councillor colleagues from the 2016 council term. I have determined that this declarable conflict of interest is not of sufficient significance that a reasonable person could have a perception of bias, or that it would lead me to making a decision on the matter that is contrary to the public interest. I will best perform my responsibility of serving the overall public interest of the whole of the council's area by participating in the discussion and voting on this matter.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Councillor Raven, would you like to declare yours?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't actually have an intention of declaring a conflict of interest. I don't believe it meets the threshold for a declarable interest, and that no reasonable person, in my opinion, would think that I have a conflict because somebody said some nasty things about me on Facebook. Given that, if my colleagues feel that I should declare one or they would like to declare one on my behalf, more than welcome to, but I don't believe it meets the criteria for what we learned about the other day in our conflict of interest training.
Thank you, Councillor Raven. Mayor Power.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I, Darren Power, declare a declarable conflict of interest in relation to item 5.1. The declarable conflict of interest because of a relationship or a related party, in that in the background papers in this report, the contact for the exemption claim is the administrator of the No Leftovers Facebook page, which has had an active campaign against me and some of my colleagues from my previous term. And as a result of that, I've determined that this declarable conflict of interest is not of sufficient significance that a reasonable person could have a perception of bias that would lead to me making a decision on the matter that is contrary to the public interest. I will best perform my responsibility of serving the overall public interest of the whole of the council area by participating in the discussion and voting on the matter.
Thank you, Mayor Power. I have Councillor Karansky, Councillor Bradley and Mayor Power who have all informed the meeting of a declarable conflict of interest but have chosen to remain in the meeting. Councillor Raven hasn't declared but is open to discussion. We will now have to vote on each conflict of interest separately. Councillor Lane?
Through you, Madam Chair, all of the people that have declared on this one particular item as part of the confidential report. I'm just wondering whether we have the capacity to request that those councillors not be part of that specific consideration and remove them from that portion. I know that from our training the other day that we can set conditions on people remaining in meetings, and I'd like to canvass that with my fellow councillors. I don't think removing people from the entire process is something that we necessarily need to do, given it's one specific applicant. So happy to.
So what we could do is we could work through 5.1 separately, and we could put a condition that those 4 councillors are in the room for the discussion but they don't vote and they leave the room. Is that what you'd like to do?
Through you, Chair, I'd actually like them to vote on all the other items other than the one in which they've declared the conflict for. I think that's reasonable.
Okay, Councillor Karansky?
Just a process question, if I may, Madam Chair. I note that Councillor Raven has put it to his colleagues whether he should participate or not. He doesn't believe he has a conflict. With regard to those of us who perceive that we may, is it appropriate for us to question Councillor Raven further, or given that we've declared a potential conflict, should we not?
We're getting there. I'm just working through the process. But 5.1 we will deal with separately. So we will do 5.2 through to 5.6 altogether. And then 5.1 we can deal with separately, and we will come in and out of confidential for that one.
Yes, that's right.
Mr. Strachan, would you like to enter discussions just to answer Councillor Karansky's questions for us regarding Councillor Raven? Councillor Karansky, do you want to ask again for us?
I'm just feeling a little paralysed at the moment, Robert, about how to move forward. Obviously, 3 of us have put together a relatively similar position. Another councillor has declared that he doesn't perceive that there's even an issue here and has opened it to questions from his colleagues. I was unsure whether, given my position right now, whether I can actually question my colleague or not.
Under the under the Act, in relation to voting on another councillor's conflict of interest, he has to be an eligible councillor. So if you've actually got the same conflict, you can't actually vote on another councillor's conflict. However, as a councillor, if you feel as though Councillor Raven does have a conflict, you could raise, any one of you could raise that as a matter that would need to be worked through, and then that would be worked through in a similar way to if Councillor Raven had declared a conflict. So my suggestion is maybe we do separate that out, that particular agenda item. We go into confidential to deal with the ones where there's no conflicts. We come out of confidential, then we go back into confidential to deal with that separate report. Now, what we could do is we could potentially deal with the conflicts that have been declared first, and then deal with Councillor Raven's matter subsequent to that.
Thank you. That answers my question. Thank you.
Just bear with us first. Oh, Councillor Banham.
Thanks, through the Chair. My concern, for, like a reasonable person of the public, so I know that we cover this out of confidential and you go into confidential for the discussion. is there a way we can have the discussion out of confidential? Because if it's a reasonable person looking at it and the councillors stay in the room, but then we go into confidential to discuss the item, that's when the general public could say, hey, we don't even know what they talked about. They could have gone against what they said they were going to do. I firmly believe the councillors will do the right thing. But if we're not in confidential, then the public can clearly see that they are doing exactly what they said they're going to do, which is the right thing. And I know there's these parts of the confidential thing, but I don't think it's that important to stay in confidential for 5.1. I believe the councillors will always do the right thing, and this way we can improve it, that's all.
I will just remind councillors not to name the interested parties as it is in confidential, but to refer to them as the interested party as named in the confidential report as well, please. And that's 5.1 through to 5.6. Mr. Strachan?
I just conferred with the, through the chair, with the finance manager. I mean, there's a fair bit of detail there in relation to the applicant and details around the applicant's organisations that will be, if it's the discussion is held in open committee, will become public knowledge. So the report will need to be tabled in open, made publicly available following that discussion. It's the finance manager's preference that that information would be discussed in a closed session.
Councillor Bradley, then Councillor Lane.
For clarification, do we need to change what we've stated? Is that what you're saying? No?
No, it's just...
I haven't referred to a name.
No, yeah, we're just reminding people because it's starting to... People are starting to talk,
okay.
that's all. Councillor Raven.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And
Sorry, I meant to go to Councillor Lane first, apologies. Okay, Councillor Raven, sorry.
just to address Councillor Bennon's concern, when the recommendation gets brought public, the vote will be transparent and public. It's just the debate that they won't be able to see in the discussion on the private and confidential matters that are in the report. So when it comes out, everyone will be able to see exactly who voted for what and how, because it'll be recorded in open session. No, it won't show the debate, but because of the confidential information, you make a decision on someone else's behalf to expose their private information. It's not prudent.
Thank you. Councillor Lane.
Through you, Madam Chair. So we've got 3 councillors that have declared a conflict of interest, where we've got one who hasn't, and then we've got people who may or may not declare that that person should have a conflict of interest. We're proposing to not address it now, but to actually go into confidential, address all of the other issues, then come back and address this. Can we just hit it out of the park and have a crack at it now? I just think that in the interest of not that, if you're listening, thank you very much, but realistically, not too many people are listening. We've got a gallery here, there's a public gallery here, let's just knock it over and go for it.
Sure. Yep, so we'll deal with 5.1 first and we'll deal with the conflicts first. And it will mean that we'll be moving in and out.
Let's address Councillor Bradley's first. So start from here.
All right, we'll work through Councillor Bradley first. So Councillor Bradley has informed the meeting of a declarable conflict of interest, but has chosen to remain in the meeting. We must now decide if it is in the public interest that Councillor Bradley participates and votes on the matter at the meeting despite their conflict of interest. I now open the floor to councillors to discuss. Councillor Lane.
I'd like to put it to you, Madam Chair, that councillors have indicated that someone was basically bastardised them in the past, and I think that we could potentially put a stance on it that councillors remain in the room on the other items, but not to discuss or enter discussions for that specific applicant, if the rest of the councillors agree.
Councillor Raven, did you want to talk into the microphone?
Sorry, Madam Chair, my apologies. Just clarifying Councillor Lane's position. So you just want to discuss 5.1, which is the Chair is doing. So this doesn't relate to any other, correct? And they're working through each conflict one by one.
Correct.
If any, just before we dive into that, although I know you've already started, if you get through all three of them and I vote and then you choose to remove me, then you put me in a position where so if anyone's going to declare or ask questions about why I haven't declared, I'd prefer it gets done before you start voting on everyone else, because if you get to a point where they hypothetically all get chosen to remove and then you do the same thing for me, they don't get an opportunity to question me, for starters.
That's exactly my point.
Yeah, and then I've voted on all of their positions and the declaration's been made afterwards. So let's deal with the pain in the butt, that is John Raven first. Dig into it, find out how the legislation stands when you get an interesting situation like this. Resolve whether or not I need to declare or someone would like to declare on my behalf, and then we can do everybody as a cohort and move forward cleanly, which I think was what Councillor Kransky was getting to earlier as well, sort of.
Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, through the chair. I would like to put forward that Councillor John Raven does have a conflict of interest in this matter. However, I do believe that they should be able to participate in the meeting and make a reasonable decision.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy.
Okay, sorry. This one I've got my training wheels on. This is going backwards and forwards. So thank you, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Raven, can you please inform this meeting whether you believe you have a prescribed or a declarable conflict of interest in this matter? And if not, please provide your belief, including the reasons for your belief.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, I do not have a prescribed conflict of interest under the Act, and I do not believe I have a declarable conflict of interest under the Act. As part of a political campaign, people will often say negative things about politicians and about candidates for election. And if I was to declare a conflict on every person who had ever said anything, either deliberately or accidentally, that was negative about me during an election campaign, I would have a lot of decisions that I would not be able to participate in. So I do not believe that is in the public interest, which is why I have not declared a conflict of interest in this matter.
Thank you, Councillor Raven. Councillor Murphy, can you please now inform the meeting about any particulars of your belief or suspicion?
I think that Councillor Raven should participate in this meeting.
So just to be clear for everyone, we haven't done this before, which is why, partially why I wanted to test it, because it's a really good example of a very, very grey area, which is the challenge with this legislation.
Through the chair.
So it's a very good exercise.
Could I just enter discussion there? Just basically to Councillor Raven's point, the problem is either way, whether we deal with the three first or with Councillor Raven's first, there's an issue in relation to just remind those councillors that have declared a conflict. You're not eligible to vote on Councillor Raven's conflict. So either way we do it, whether he voted on yours or you voted on him, I just remind you that under the Act you would be ineligible.
Thank you. Councillor Bannon?
So if we vote now that John doesn't have a conflict to declare and he's allowed to stay in the room, he can obviously vote on the other guys because he's been cleared.
Absolutely correct.
So that's what we're doing now, is voting on John.
Correct. So, councillors, we must now decide whether or not Councillor Raven has a prescribed conflict of interest or a declarable conflict of interest in this matter. Just a reminder that Councillor Kransky, Bradley and Power cannot vote in this. I will now open the floor to councillors to discuss, and then I will require someone to move a motion and to provide a reason for their decision. Councillor Bannon?
I'm happy to move that Councillor Raven does not have a conflict of interest.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Bannon, sorry, what was your reason for the motion? She's just got to bring it up on the screen.
I agree with everything that Councillor Raven said. I believe he gave enough reasoning and how he explained himself. And I fully support what he said and believe it.
Thank you. We're just going to wait for that to pop up on the screen. Councillor Raven?
Just a point of order. Did you give an option for no conflict? I thought you just gave an option for they must choose between prescribed or declarable.
I did. I said a prescribed conflict of interest or a declarable conflict of interest. So.
I might weigh in there as well. This was a point of confusion in prior committee meetings. The way the Act's written, it talks about whether there's a prescribed or declarable, but we did seek advice during, I think it was a city infrastructure meeting, where it is an option to determine that there is no conflict of interest.
So through the chair, you just add that as the option, because we'd have to vote down that one and do another one.
Yes, the script might need a bit of work next time. Okay, so on the screen we have a motion that regarding Councillor Raven's informed conflict of interest from Councillor Murphy in respect of item 5.1 of the City Governance Committee held on the 17th of February 2021, Councillor Raven does not have a prescribed or declarable conflict of interest. And B, the reason provided by eligible councillors for the decision as detailed above is as follows. They believe Councillor Raven gave enough reasoning and fully explained himself and they support it. Councillor Bannon has moved. Councillor Murphy was seconding. Any other further discussion? All those in favour of the motion on the screen, please raise your hand. That has been carried. That has been carried. Councillor Heremiah.
Against.
Against. So Councillor Heremiah was against. Councillor Karansky did not vote. Mayor Power did not vote. Councillor Raven did not vote. And I note that Councillor Bradley has left the room. But she wasn't voting anyway.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Could I ask that the minute clerks add the reasoning that I gave to that description, just for future reference and record?
It's included in the minutes beforehand.
Thank you very much.
There you go. Apologies. Okay. Councillor Murphy?
For the record, I think that we really need to correct that motion just to say that it, for his political career, that he feels that he can make this decision, and if in the motion, do you think we should add that extra bit of information, even though it's in the minutes previously?
Can we add it in later? Or do we have to vote again? We can amend it at ordinary council, but it's been moved, it's been seconded,
Okay,
it's been
thank you
voted
very
on,
much.
so we can change it.
But it has, it is in the minutes previous.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. And now we will circle back and we will work through Councillor Bradley's first. So Councillor Bradley has informed the meeting of a declarable conflict of interest but has chosen to remain in the meeting. We must now decide if it is in the public interest that Councillor Bradley participates and votes on the matter at the meeting despite their conflict of interest, or be requested to leave the meeting and not participate in the discussion or vote on the matter. I now open the floor to councillors to discuss, and then I will require someone to move a motion and to provide the reason for the decision. Councillor Lane, followed by Councillor Raven.
Through you, Madam Chair, can I ask Councillor Bradley a question, please, in relation to her declaration? Councillor Bradley, do you believe in declaring this that you would show bias or unfairly sway people against this?
Definitely not.
If that's the case, and I know that there's two other councillors and I'll be asking them exactly the same question, why the declaration? Is it just simply because this person has, again, as I said before, bastardised you in the past and thrown shade at you as a candidate and as a councillor?
For me, it's about transparency, through the chair.
If there's no other questions, can I move that if a councillor has declared that they are unsure about it, that they remain in the room but not vote on the actual item so that we can ask questions if they have local knowledge? I don't know whether that's acceptable, but...
We can put that as a condition. I did have Councillor Raven first, or Councillor Raven would... Mayor Power.
I'm going to change my mind. I'm going to walk. So if you want to go to me first, get rid of me, and then the other councillors might reconsider.
Point of order, he's already made his decision.
Councillor Raven.
So, I don't know how you can change the declaration afterwards. If I can make my question though, it'll make it easier for everybody. I think that my question wasn't so much of a question to Councillor Bradley, it was more that I have the utmost faith that the three councillors who have declared their conflicts are doing so with the intent of being transparent and making sure that their colleagues can make the decision as to whether or not they remain in the meeting, which is what the legislation envisages. I think it is in the public interest that we vote. That's why I thought it was in the public interest that we also raise mine separately so that it could be determined whether or not it's a conflict at all. They have declared it. There's nothing wrong with declaring a conflict. There's nothing bad about it. It is a good thing to do. And I'm very supportive of all of them remaining in the meeting and participating to their full capacity, because they will not act with bias, and only an unreasonable person would think they had one. And so I think they are doing the right thing by remaining in the meeting. It is in the public interest that they remain, and I think they will do their duties admirably.
Thank you, Councillor Raven. Mayor Power, I think we might wait. Councillor Bannon, followed by Councillor Russell.
Through the chair, so going from what Deputy Mayor John Raven just said, I don't understand why the Mayor wants to walk. Because of what you're stating, and I believe I'm in agreement with you, but it just concerned me that the Mayor said he wants to change the declaration and leave the room. So I don't understand that, because if the Mayor leaves the room, but that makes it harder for the other two.
He's just trying to simplify it without speaking on it. He's trying to simplify it. But I think the process should get followed, because that's the way the legislation was envisaged. It would be followed, and that's the most appropriate course of action.
Okay.
Encourage him to stay, Mr. Mayor. I'd encourage you to stay.
Mayor Power, did you want to rebut before I go to Councillor Russell?
Yeah, the decision's mine, no one else's. I will be changing my wording in regard to the reasons why I have a conflict, and I'll be inserting the words "an active and deeply personal smear campaign." And as a result of that wording, I don't believe that I could. I don't believe the residents' perception, considering how active the Facebook page was, that, and it doesn't matter whether what my opinion is, it's what the public think. And as a result of that, I propose to voluntarily exclude myself from the meeting while the matter is debated and the vote is taken.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Power.
And I'll be excluding myself.
Yep, so Mayor Power is excluding himself from the rest of this discussion for 5.1. We will continue to work through Councillor Bradley's. Does any, Councillor Russell? It's okay, thanks. Okay.
Through the chair, I've been wanting to go to the toilet for like 10 minutes, so I'm just going to run out.
Okay. Sharing is caring, Councillor Bannon. Thank you. Does
How's
anyone
that for transparency?
Does anyone else have anything else they wish to discuss or ask any more questions for Councillor Bradley? Councillor Lane.
Councillor Bradley, do you think you can make a decision on this thing based on its merit?
100% yes.
Councillor Russell.
Sorry, I will go back to what I was going to say to weigh into the debate, is that the councillors who've declared have actually already stated that they believe it's in the public's best interest and that they feel they can participate unbiased.
Okay. Councillor Raven.
I know you've already got a motion on the floor. Are you withdrawing that motion? So I note that Councillor Lane has withdrawn her motion. I would like to move that Councillor Bradley be able to participate fully in the debate, as I have the utmost faith that she will do so without bias. and do so in the public interest. And not to have her in the debate would be to the detriment of the public interest.
Thank you. Just allow us a bit of time just to get the motion up on the screen. And I will note that Councillor Bannon has let us all know that he has returned.
Yeah, I'll do the fast like you go.
Nearly done. We're just waiting for the motion to come up on the screen, so please bear with us. Okay, the motion is up on the screen. Please have a quick read of it, councillors.
Can you please remove the second utmost? That's a lot of utmosting. Just faith? Nah, I'm happy utmost faith.
All right, the motion is on the screen. Councillor Raven, are you moving that motion? Councillor Raven has moved the motion that is on the screen. Is there a seconder for the motion? Councillor Murphy has seconded the motion. Do we have any further discussion on the motion? If not, I would ask everyone to vote. Please raise your hands if you're in favour of the motion. All right, so I have Councillor Russell, Councillor Raven, Councillor Hall, Councillor Fraser, Councillor Stemp, Councillor Murphy and Councillor Wilcox in favour. Councillor Lane?
Against.
Councillor Harrimeyer?
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Bannon?
Against.
That motion has been carried. That was 7 votes for. Councillor Bradley, you may stay. Okay, let us work through. Councillor Karansky's next. Councillor Karansky has informed the meeting of a declarable conflict of interest but has chosen to remain in the meeting. We must now decide if it is in the public interest that Councillor Karansky participates and votes on the matter at the meeting despite their conflict of interest, or be requested to leave the meeting and not participate in the discussion or vote on the matter. I now open the floor to councillors to discuss, and then I will require someone to move a motion and provide a reason for the decision. Who would like to start? Councillor Murphy, followed by Councillor Raven.
Thank you, through the chair. I believe that Councillor Karansky should stay in the meeting, as I don't believe that she has a declarable conflict of interest, and I believe that she will debate this matter in the most confidence way to give the best outcome for our residents.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Raven?
I support Councillor Murphy's position. Believe that Councillor Karansky, if she was excluded from the debate, would be to the detriment of the public interest, given her very relevant local knowledge and her ability to separate the matters of the campaign from matters that are in the public interest.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Councillor Karansky regarding her conflict of interest? Councillor Lane.
Thanks very much. Councillor Karansky, through you, Madam Chair. You believe that you would be able to make a decision that's unbiased and in no way reflects what's happened in the past as a result of these people bastardising you?
Through the chair, may I respond? Thank you, Councillor Lane. In determining my position regarding this issue, I referred to our recent conflict of interest training with legal experts. And in the interest of openness and transparency, I presented this issue to my colleagues for their consideration. But as stated, as part of the conflict of interest form, I've determined that this declarable conflict of interest is not of sufficient significance that a reasonable person could have a perception of bias. So in other words, yes, I do. I believe I can act in the best interest of the public.
Does that answer it for you, Councillor Lane?
Absolutely, it does. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Murphy, could you just clarify your decision so that we can put the motion up on the screen?
That Councillor Karansky does not have a declarable conflict of interest, and that I believe that Councillor Karansky will perform her duties as a councillor to the utmost of her ability and not to the detriment of our residents.
Fantastic. We're just waiting for that to pop up on the screen.
Through you, Madam Chair. I have a problem with that wording in the sense that if I make a decision to oppose that, that essentially says that I'm saying that Councillor Karansky does not have the capacity to represent residents. I don't agree with the wording of that. Sorry.
So could I get some guidance maybe from the Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, I would just use the identical wording as Councillor Bradley as their, just to make it simple, as their conflict is identical and the reasons are identical and they are equally as integrous as each other.
Thank you. We're just going to reword it just slightly.
I'm not sure if integrous is a word, Madam Chair,
No.
so we can put it in the diary now though. Dictionary.
Oxford dictionaries,
Yep.
please take note. Councillor Hall.
Before I cast my next vote, I'm really interested to know why Councillor Hiramaya is voting against on these. Just get his viewpoint as to why he might be voting against.
Madam Chair, may I respond?
Sure.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And in response to Councillor Hall's question, I don't have confidence in the motion, therefore I'm not voting in favour.
Does that answer it for you, Councillor Hall?
I mean, like I understand, you know, we've got public servants, police officers, they're regularly bastardised by people, but every day they get up and they do their job. They get up and they do what they're paid to do. I see this as no different, really. You know, people will always, there will always be people that will say negative things about you, no matter how good your work is, but you have to get up and do your work. And, you know, we're employed here to make these decisions. And, you know, I don't think we can let people saying bad things against us get in the way of that. You just have to do the job.
Through the chair, if I could answer that through you, and I don't want to talk on your behalf, Jacob, but I think that's going down the wrong path. I have all faith in the world in Councillor Bradley and Karansky and the Mayor and Councillor Raven. The only part that put me into a bit of doubt was when it's not what I'm thinking, it's the general public, it's what they're thinking as well as a reasonable person. And when the Mayor removed himself from the room, that put me into doubt, because he removed himself because he must have thought a reasonable person or someone from the public didn't agree with him, so he left. And that's me talking on behalf of the Mayor, which I shouldn't do. I'm just explaining to you why I voted against it. I didn't vote against it because I don't believe Councillor Bradley or Councillor Karansky will do the wrong thing, because I just know they would do the right thing. But it's what the general public are going to think of it. And when the Mayor removed himself, it put me into a little bit of doubt. So that's my explanation. Sorry to talk on your behalf, Jacob, but that's the reason. So just the way you said that then about the police, we're not saying we have an issue with our fellow councillors. It's the general public could look at it or how they could view it.
Councillor Raven, did you want to go next?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and also not wanting to speak on the Mayor's behalf, but as he removed himself, he's not here to comment. The particular campaign was focused more intently on the Mayor than it was on any of the other three councillors that it diminished, and they went above and beyond with the Mayor, if you like. So I can see a difference between the severity of the issues and how personal they were between the three of us and the Mayor. I can actually also see a difference between how much attention I got compared to my other two colleagues as well, because for whatever reason they've received more attention. So that could probably give councillors some peace of mind that the Mayor was attacked particularly intently, and in political debate that's freedom of speech and that's how it goes, but he may feel that that is a more serious issue than any of the other three of us face, which is why he's taken the extra step. That's how I view it. That's what I would think looking from the outside, but as he's not here to provide comment, I couldn't ask him directly.
Councillor Hall, if you're finished, can we move on to the motion? Or
I'd just like to add, I mean, there is a person that I know that continually makes bad comments about me, and but I continually say to that person, look, no matter what you say to me, if you ever have an issue, more than happy to sit down, talk to you and help you with your problem and make sure that you're heard in council as well. So I think it's a degree of professionalism that we're here to do a job and we set aside people's opinions and just focus on doing the job.
thank you, Councillor Bradley.
Can I just have clarification? Am I allowed to vote on this?
Yes, you can, because we've already moved through your motion, so we're now on Councillor Karansky's. Yes. So we have a motion on the board. If you could all cast your eyes over it. Sorry, I've just had clarifications. So, Councillor Bradley, you are excluded from voting because you have declared a conflict of interest, even though it was voted down. You're still eligible to vote. Can Councillor Raven vote though, because he did not declare a conflict of interest, and it was raised on his behalf? Yes. Just double checking that one.
Nothing wrong with the legislation though, is there?
Apologies to all. Okay. Councillor Murphy, are you happy to move the motion that's on the screen? Do I have a seconder for the motion that's on the screen? Councillor Russell has seconded the motion. Do we have any further discussion? All those in favour, please raise your hand. Okay, I have Councillor Wilcox, Councillor Russell, Councillor Raven, Councillor Hall, Councillor Fraser, Councillor Stemp, Councillor Murphy, all in favour. I said Councillor Wilcox. Councillor Lane.
I'm against, Madam Chair.
Councillor Harrimeyer.
Against.
Councillor Bannon.
Against.
And Councillor Karansky and Councillor Bradley were ineligible to vote. Sorry, we're just calculating on the screen. That has been carried. That was carried with 6 votes. Apologies, it's just been updated. It was 7. With myself, sorry. Okay. Wonderful. We will now move into confidential for all 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, 5.4, 5.5 and 5.6, now that we have now resolved that.
Madam Chair,
Councillor Karansky.
my apologies, but I note that the Mayor removed himself. Was that only for 5.1?
Is he still outside?
Yes, because we're dealing with...
So what I'm saying is the Mayor would be eligible to participate in the balance, so we're teasing 5.1 out from the remainder of the...
Okay, so we're actually going to go into 5.1 confidential first, then we will come out and then we will go back in. Apologies. Sorry, Mr. Mayor. I note that item 5.1 is confidential, and I note that it is necessary to take the discussion of this report into a closed session as the decisions are in relation to rating concessions and details contained in the report relate to specific properties. Do councillors wish to move into closed session for these items pursuant to section 254J number 3 of the Local Government Regulation 2012? And if applicable, please provide an overview of your intended discussions if it's different to the prepared motion. I remind councillors that if there is no desire to discuss the confidential matters, there is no requirement to move into closed session. I will now open the floor to councillors. So Councillor Lane has moved that we go into confidential. Councillor Murphy has seconded we go into confidential. All those in favour of moving into confidential, please raise your hand. Councillor Bradley, are you voting to go into confidential? Thank you. That has been carried unanimously with the exclusion of Mayor Power, who is not in the room. day of the Local Government Regulation Act at 11:31 a.m. Please invite the gallery back in. Apologies, I just did that on camera. Sorry. Mayor Pat. Okay. Apologies to the gallery and those watching that at home. Mayor Power is still not allowed in to vote on item 5.1. So, there being no further discussion, I will now move for the motions. Item 5.1 is on the board. Do I have a mover for the motion? Councillor Lane. Do I have a seconder for the motion that's on the board? Councillor Murphy. All those in favour of the motion for 5.1 that is on the screen, please raise your hand. That has been carried unanimously. Thank you. Now we can invite Mayor Power back in and anyone in the gallery that is outside. Take 3, Mayor Power. Sorry. All right, I will now refer to items 5.2 through to 5.6, which collectively discuss the reports for rate exemptions and concessions, and they are numbers 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. Before we open discussion on these items, we've already gone through conflicts of interest. Let's go here, and I note that items 5.2 to 5.6 are confidential, and I note that it is considered necessary to take this discussion of these reports into a closed session as the discussions are in relation to rating concessions and the details contained in these reports relate to specific properties. Do any councillors wish to move into closed session for these reports pursuant to section 254J number 3 of the Local Government Regulation 2012, and if applicable, please provide an overview of your intended discussion if it's different to the prepared motion on the screen. I remind councillors that if there is no desire to discuss the confidential matters, there is no requirement to move into closed sessions, and I will now open the floor to councillors. Councillor Lane. Councillor Lane has moved us into confidential. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Fraser has seconded the motion to move us into confidential. All those in favour of moving us into confidential, please raise your hand. That is unanimous. We will now move back into confidential for discussion. Sorry, I'm just trying to find my place. Okay, back to here. And I've got to work through them all separately. That's done. Beautiful. Sorry. I will now refer to the motion for item 5.2. There is a motion on the screen.
Madam Chair, can I move an amended motion?
Sure, we can put up the amended motion. What is your amended motion?
Can you change rate concession of 20% to 100%, please, of a maximum of $500 per quarter still?
We will move through this motion first.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
It is up on the screen for everyone. Have a quick read. You happy with that motion, Councillor Raven, that's on the screen? Okay.
Happy to move that motion, Madam Chair.
Councillor Raven has moved the motion that's on the screen. Do I have a seconder for the motion that's on the screen? Councillor Hall has seconded the motion. Councillor, all those in favour? Oh, any further discussion on the motion that's on the screen? No? All those in favour of the motion that's on the screen, please raise your hands. I have Councillor Lang, Councillor Raven and Councillor Hall in favour of that motion, and we will go around the room for the rest. Mayor Power, are you against, abstain on that motion?
Sorry, I'm against recommendation.
Against, Councillor Bradley? Against, Councillor Russell? Against, Councillor Fraser?
Against.
Against, Councillor Heremiah?
Against.
Councillor Bannon?
Against.
Councillor Stamp?
Against.
Councillor Kuransky?
Against.
Councillor Murphy?
Against.
And Councillor Wilcox is against as well. So that has not got up. That is against. Councillor Bradley.
Chair, Councillor Wilcox, I'm happy to move the original recommendation.
Okay, we will put the original motion back up on the screen. On the screen, councillors, you will see the original motion is back up on the screen. Councillor Bradley has moved that motion. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Bannon has seconded that motion. All those in favour of the motion that's on the screen, please raise your hands. That has been carried unanimously. Thank you. I'll just wait for the minute clerks to catch up. Okay, we will now refer to the motion for item 5.3. Councillor Lane, do you have an amended motion to go up?
Thank you, Chair. I move to receive the report.
Okay, Councillor Lane has received the report. Councillor Bradley has seconded that motion. All those in favour? Oh, just one moment. We're just amending that motion to put it up on the screen. Apologies, just one moment.
Would the meeting service officers like to keep the confidential? Yeah, cool.
Excellent. On the board is a amended motion that the report be received. It has been moved by Councillor Lane, has been seconded by Councillor Bradley. All those in favour of receiving the report, please raise your hand. That has been carried unanimously. Thank you. We'll now move to item 5.4 and we'll bring that up on your screen in just a tick. Okay, I have 5.4 on the screen. Please cast your eyes over it. Okay. Councillor Bradley has moved 5.4. Do I have a seconder for 5.4? That has been seconded by Councillor Bannon. Do I have... Can you please raise your hands if you're in favour of the motion that's on the board? Apologies. That has been carried unanimously. Thank you. We'll now go to 5.5 in a minute. $5.5 is now on the board. Do I have a mover for 5.5? Councillor Bradley has moved. Do I have a seconder for 5.5? Councillor Bannon. All those in favour, please raise your hand at 5.5. That has been carried unanimously. Thank you. We now have item 5.6 on the board. Do I have a mover for 5.6? Councillor Raven has moved. Councillor Bannon has seconded. All those in favour of item 5.6, please raise your hands. That has been carried unanimously. Thank you. Well, that marks the end of the Finance Manager's report. Is there any general business for Ms Bugg? And Ms Bugg, do you have any general business for us? You have general business for Ms Bugg? Yes? Go.
I'm not sure if it's to Ms Bugg or to...
Councillor Bradley, could you turn on your microphone as well when you speak? Okay, well let me... Caroline, Ms Bugg, I think you can be excused. I think you can go.
Thank you, Chair.
I note that due to social distancing restrictions, not all managers or staff could attend today. That being said, does anyone have any general business for the Acting Director of Organisational Services, Ms Kay Sullivan, or for the Acting Chief Executive Officer, Mr Robert Strachan? Councillor Bradley.
Chair, Councillor Wilcox, thank you. Mr Strachan, can I just ask a question, please, about the value incentive performance payment that is given to staff? Is that just another way of saying bonus? Is that what it's been set up for? Bonus for staff?
The Value Incentive Performance Program is set up as a reward and recognition program for staff, where staff show exemplary performance during the year. Their manager or program leader can, if they like, nominate the particular member of staff for a VIP payment, as we call it. So it's linked to reward and recognition.
Possible during the budget process that we get some information about that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any further general business? Well, that completes our agenda for today, and I declare the City Governance Committee meeting of the 17th of February 2021 concluded at 12:08 p.m. Thank you for your attendance and thank you for watching online.